Good afternoon, folks. My name is Lucas Harth, and I am a Vice President of Engineering at BMW. Well, I'd like to start off right now by asking, have any of you know someone who has an alcoholic problem? I sure do. As a matter of fact, over 30% of Americans have an alcohol dependency. 30%, that's an outrageous number, right? Now, what about when that alcohol, that's one thing to think about what it does to a person in their own time, in their own space, but what about when it's brought home to my workplace? Right now, I'm facing a big issue. One of my colleagues, who's also a vice president, I'm suspecting has an alcoholic problem. I've seen him outside of work. He's been doing things that lead me to believe that his actions show me that he could be an alcoholic. To make matters worse, I've had a bunch of his employees come approach me and say that they think the same thing. But I'm torn because they are people who don't think the most of him. So what do I do in this situation? Well, I'd like to talk about two different points here. Let's look at alcoholism in the workplace versus alcoholism at home. In the workplace, it's really important to remember because absenteeism increases 4 to 8 times more for an alcoholic. So not just being late for work, but being late for meetings. I need someone I can depend on. What about poor work ethic, right? So you've been drinking all night, you show up to work the next day. What are the chances that you're going to be as enthusiastic about working or as clear-headed and level-headed as the next guy who hasn't been drinking all night before? And the worst of it all, safety. Safety. 20 to 25% of all work-related accidents are due to alcoholism. Almost a fourth because of alcohol. What about at home? So you take this, the alcoholism, I said it's not as big of a deal when it's at home, but what happens when they bring it to work? You go home and all of a sudden these problems start to mature at home and you bring them into work. And your attitude and your behavior that you had at home all of a sudden starts to reflect at work. And the way you're upset from something that's been happening at home, and all of a sudden that reflects how you treat others in the workplace. How can we condone that? Well, my problem is I'm very torn. I'm a compassionate guy. Like I raised my hand earlier, I know people that have suffered from this disease. So it's my duty and my obligation to show compassion towards this friend. Plus, I've been working with the guy for over 20 years. He's shown me great work ethic. He's shown me what kind of job he can do. So why should I turn my back on him now? But like I've said, I've been at this company for over 20 years, so it's part of my duty. I have high integrity, and I value this company very strongly, and I cannot let myself live down the fact that I let a guy with alcoholism work in this place and jeopardize the safety of others here. I'm not working at a pillow factory. I'm working at an automotive factory. This is a big deal. So what do I do? Right? That's the biggest question. How do I handle the situation? It cannot be taken lightly, but it's a very sensitive subject, and it's something that you must approach in the right way. Given I have a little bit of experience in this area, that is what I share to him. I want to approach him first and say, listen, I'm concerned about you, but this concern is not coming from a place of I'm going to get you in trouble. It's coming from a place of love and compassion. That's what you must show. And I must share my experience and say, listen, I've had family members and friends that have suffered, but I've seen what they can do. I've seen the turnaround. I've seen you in your best moments, and I've seen you in your lows right now. And I know this is not you. And I know you're a better person than that. But it must come from me, and it must come from my heart, because if I approach him like I'm lecturing him, what good is that going to do? Nothing. So what am I going to do? I'm going to offer him help. And I'm going to offer him to go seek treatment. And I'm going to offer that our company sponsor it. A sad statistic is that only 11.2% of addicts and alcoholics actually receive treatment. Only 11.2%. But there's still hope. And if I approach this from a lighthearted standpoint, I think we can be successful. So I hope that you understand from my approach how conflicting it is with my values and my compassion versus my integrity. My roles as a colleague, as a vice president, and my roles as a friend. And I hope that you would make the same choice I would. Thank you.
45 seconds.
Woo!
And our,
Nailed it!
and our 2-minute question and answer period will begin right now.
What part of accountability? Where do you see accountability in your point?
Well, it's a two-sided coin, you know. It's a lot of it's on him, but on the same point, a lot of it's on us. A lot of it's on us as colleagues and as people who work with him. It's very important that we hold him accountable because clearly he's lost his path. And that's the hardest part is once you take that detour and go down the bad path, it's hard for you to get corrected without the help of others. So that's where colleagues must step in. Instead of approaching it and saying, listen, you know, you're doing a terrible job, but approach it and say, hey, we want to help you. We want to show you how to get back on the right path. So that's where it's more up to us than it is up to him right now.
What if he declines?
If he declines, then it is my obligation as a member of this company to say, listen, I'm sorry and I will always be here for you, but there's not a position here for you, this company. Because that's just it. It's safety. He's putting not only his life in jeopardy, but the life of every single other person here in jeopardy. Yes, ma'am.
When you spoke to him, did you speak to him one-on-one, or did you have
Absolutely one-on-one. It must, as private as possible. And my approach is very calm. And like I said, it must come from compassionate side. And I'm not giving names of who's told me things, but I'm saying I've seen some things and I understand what it's like and I have some experience in this area. So please let me show my experience and tell my experience and maybe you'll hear something or maybe something will jump out to you. You know, that's kind of where you approach. I cannot automatically label him as an alcoholic and say, you've done this. I must say, if you're having problems, you know, let me talk to you about some of the problems I faced. Let me talk to you about how I overcame them. Things like that.
Okay, any more questions? One more time for Luke.